This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting today's show is K-State weed scientist Jeremie Kouame with information on warm-season perennial grasses and what people can do when trying to control them. Brian Briggeman, director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center at K-State, continues the show as he discusses the health of cooperatives, an anniversary for the center, and an upcoming symposium for people interested in cooperatives. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has released a recommended decision to update all 11 federal milk marketing orders. To end today's show is K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk as he takes a closer look at the proposal, which includes changes to pricing formulas and milk composition factors. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Tuesday show talking about control options for perennial grasses. And then to talk about it, we're joined by K-State weed scientist Jeremie Kouame. Jeremie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby, for having me.
Jeremie, you recently wrote an Agronomy e-update on controlling these perennial grasses, but before we talk about the control, what grasses are we talking about today?
Many questions have been coming in about the best way to manage some of those warm-season perennial grasses, as sometimes it can become really difficult to control them with herbicide programs. And three of those warm-season perennial grasses are windmill grass, we also have tumble grass, and purple freehound. And these three grasses are all native to the United States.
How can they be identified?
When we start talking about identification of grasses, we have what we call ligules. And so the ligules can be present or absent. And when they are present, they can either be hairy or membranous. And so those three grasses do have all membranous ligules. So when we talk about windmill grass, it has a ciliate membrane with long hairs behind the margins. But tumble grass has the ligule, which is continuous with the sheath margin. Purple freehound, on the other hand, has fringed hairs on this membrane. Another thing we can use is the leaf blade. For windmill grass, we have a folded, narrow leaf blade, which is somehow keeled toward the base. And when the leaves are mature, they are hairless to rough. For tumble grass, we have a flat, smooth leaf blade with fine teeth. On the margins, we have white margins and a prominent midrib. The leaves can become wavy and somehow twisted at maturity. But for purple freehound, we have leaves which are rolled inward, flat maturity. The sheath itself, which is compressed, hairless for windmill grass. But for tumble grass, it's loose, flattened, while for purple freehound, we have smooth to slightly rough, and the color has a tuft of long hairs on either side. Something, though, which is interesting is about the inflorescences, because the common names of the three of them basically come from some aspect of the seed head. So for tumble windmill grass, we have the seed head which can break away, at maturity, and which is moved with the wind, and it allows that weed to disperse its seeds. And it's the same process for tumble grass. For purple freehound, we have this panicle that is purple to red. So even some books will talk about red freehound. And what we call lemma has those on which are three of equal length. So that's where basically the common names come from. And so that's some of the key characteristics we can use to differentiate those.
For tumble windmill grass, tumble grass, or purple freehound, where are people likely to find it?
Basically, we can find windmill grass and tumble grass throughout the states. But primarily, purple freehound is primarily found in the western two-thirds of the state. And windmill grass has historically been a problem in turf grass, but it has invaded no-till, cropping systems. And it can be found in pastures, parks, rangelands. It can even become a problem in lawn. For tumble grass, it grows on open, disturbed, and relatively dry soils. It grows well on some slick spots, associated with soils high in sodium, indicator of disturbed soils. For purple freon, it also grows on dry soils, right? And rocky soils, stuff like that. And it is seldom eaten by livestock. And so it's able to invade areas where productive and palatable grasses have been, weakened by overgrazing. So it has been shown as like an indicator of overgrazing. Another thing which is interesting is how they reproduce. Tumblegrass and purple freon reproduce by seed, basically. But windmill grass reproduces by seed, but also by some rooting at the lower nodes.
So, Jeremie, for people who are wanting to control these warm-season perennial grasses, is there a stage that they're likely to get the best control?
Earlier, we have some programs, the better they are. And so a previous research at K-State here showed that, there are some stages where the control is better. And so this was done in the greenhouse. And what they did basically was to spray windmill grass at 3 different stages. The first one being the tillering stage, where the plant was about 2 to 4 inch tall. And the second stage was at the tillering stage, when each plant had between 5 to 10 tillers. And the last stage was the heading stage, where the plants were, having the first seed head emerging. And the herbicides which were used we had some group 1 herbicides. Basically, we had Post, Select Max, and Assure. And we also had glyphosate. And so when they sprayed those, the result showed that when those group 1 herbicides were sprayed at the seedling stage, they achieved 100% windmill grass mortality. But when they were sprayed at the tillering stage, they achieved about 90% control or injury. And when glyphosate was applied, it was kind of the same. So at the tillering stage and also at the seedling stage, they achieved a great control. So basically, when they are sprayed at the seedling stage, the control is better.
Also wanting to take the time today, Jeremie, to mention some pre- and post-emergence control for tumble windmill grass.
Yes, it was done in the field during 2 years. So they had pre-emergence herbicide programs, also post-emergence herbicide programs. And basically, this was in a no-till corn production system. And for the post-emergence application, the herbicides were sprayed when the weed was between 1 and 2 inch tall. And the result from this research also showed that, they achieved very good control, right? All pre-emergence herbicides and all post-emergence herbicides provided at least 90% control of windmill grass each year. And for the post, a sequential application of glyphosate provided the best control. And it was really interesting because, again, the earlier we spray those weeds, the better the control will be.
What other research has been done on this topic?
Another study which used some post-emergence herbicide, and this time they were sprayed when the weeds were between 10 and 12 inch tall at the heading stage. The control was really, low. These programs were ineffective. Again, when it comes to herbicide control for windmill grass, we always have to be really early.
What about for people who are wanting to use tillage for control?
This study was on a long-term, no-till area. And so what the authors did, they used a strategic tillage. They implemented a one-time tillage. And what they noticed was that the density of purple freon and windmill grass was significantly reduced. So again, when we achieve or when the plant has established this perennial growth aspect, a strategic tillage will always be helpful to manage it.
And a lot of times people use burning as a control method. And is this something that can be done for these perennial grasses?
When it comes to tumble grass, grazing, for example, will not be an option because of its unpalatable nature, right? And it's also fire adapted, which means burning will not likely work for tumble grass. But for purple freon, there has been a research by USDA which showed that, burning can be effective. So the researchers wanted to give, land managers a way to keep the rangelands really viable, so that the cattle that is grazing on them can stay healthy and, well fed. When they were conducting this research, there was little known about how effective fire would be as a management tool for purple freehound. So they did 3 studies. The first one was in the greenhouse. And so basically what they did, they grew that weed and also with some grasses of interest. And they were grown alone and in mixtures. And they applied the fire. And so the results showed that they got at least 61% reduction in the biomass of purple freehound. What they found really significant. And so even though that study was in greenhouse, the authors said this was an indication that fire would be a good control option for purple freehound. And the other study was to understand, what would be the best timing for applying fire to control purple freehound. And so basically what they found is, burning during the fall provided some good level of control, but burning during the summer provided a better control. And more specifically, when the spring that was before that burning event was wet, they achieved a greater control. So that's it. And the third study also confirmed that, burning during the summer provided the best control because this grass, as it's a warm season grass, the growth cycle is during the summer.
Jeremie, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much, Shelby, for having me.
That was K-State weed scientist Jeremie Kouame. I will link his Agronomy E update article, Control Options for Warm-Season Perennial Grasses, in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about cooperatives and some upcoming events with the director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center at K-State and professor in Ag Econ, Brian Briggeman. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby. Pleasure to be here.
Brian, as we're talking about cooperatives, how are they doing right now?
As you look across the Kansas landscape for ag co-ops, we're coming off a pretty tough period of time where there was some financial stress among cooperatives, as we know, well documented about the drought and just how that brought challenges from the amount of bushels that would go through these co-ops, which is really kind of the lifeblood for many of our ag co-ops across the state. But also, too, commodity markets have been such to where there wasn't much incentive to store grain. And so that also hurts a cooperative business model as well, because many of our co-ops are built to store the grain from their farmer owners and then sell it at a later time to capture some what they call carry in the market. So, it's been tough. It's been tough. So now looking forward, I was talking with some co-op leaders this week from Kansas, and things were a little bit better from a wheat harvest perspective, kind of came in above what expectations were. And then looking ahead to the fall crop, hopefully, we'll have plenty of bushels that'll come through. So, maybe it's slightly optimistic looking forward, but in terms of just kind of the overall condition, last couple of years have been pretty tough.
And Brian, I mentioned that you're involved with the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center as its director, and it's had an anniversary that's kind of important or wanting to note.
Yeah, that's right. So the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center was founded in 1984. So this is our 40th anniversary, which is pretty fantastic that, a center, devoted to cooperatives has had that long standing in the community, here at K-State, and continues to thrive. So it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to be the Capper Center director since 2011. And it's really great to look back and think about all that, has been accomplished by the Capper Center.
And how in 1984 did this come together?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, as many of your listeners well know, the 1980s were turbulent for agriculture, especially here in Kansas. And co-op leaders at the time said, these kind of events might happen again. Not that we're expecting another farm debt crisis, but challenges for agriculture. So they turned to Kansas State University to form a center of excellence. And what's unique about the Capper Center is that in the individuals who put the center together really had the foresight of, let's create a public-private partnership between Kansas State University and the Kansas Cooperative Council. And so they house the center in the Department of Agricultural Economics. You know, there are some, in terms of like funding and how that all works, you know, comes from K-State but really a lot of it comes from the cooperative community. Even at the very beginning, it was kind of the challenge put to those who are in charge of the Capper Center to create a model that can be self-sustaining. So not necessarily built off of grants or things that have a short timeline or sunset on them, but rather let's fulfill the land grant model in a way that we can have a long-standing center that can build those relationships over time. So yeah, I think, you know, a lot of that just goes back to when we were created and why we're able to celebrate our 40th anniversary this year.
What are some exciting things happening at the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center?
So some of the things that for me that, you know, part of the success of the Capper Center is, you know, we fulfill the land grant mission for co-ops. So, you know, here at K-State, we're a land grant university. So that means teaching, research, and extension, right? Those are what we're charged to do. So at the Capper Center, we do that, like I said, for co-ops. So on the teaching front, one of the things that is just an absolute joy to do each year is to award about $60,000 of co-op scholarships on an annual basis to K-State students. And where teaching comes in on that, yes, certainly on the scholarship side, but also, you know, some of our, you know, top scholarships are basically full rides, and they go through an interview process, the students who receive those. And so that's a real chance for not only the student to have an awesome opportunity to get a great scholarship, but also to hear from co-op leaders who participate in those interviews and to learn a little bit about co-ops. I teach a co-ops class here at K-State, so it's taught every fall semester, and it's, you know, started that in 2016, and it's grown to where last year we had 53 students in, and this year we have 48. And it's not just in Ag Econ, it's all across the College of Agriculture here at K-State and also across the university. So that teaching side. And of course, on the research, I work with a number of graduate students on various projects from, you know, kind of gets into a peer review journal article to a lot of stuff we put out on fact sheets. So if your listeners go to our website at accc.ksu.edu, you can access a lot of that information. And one of them ties directly to the condition of co-ops on our website. We have a mapping project where we track the evolving Kansas co-op landscape. And so you can click on that map, see when we started the project back in 2016 to how co-ops have changed and evolved to today and where they are at. So that's been a great way to kind of provide some information out on research. And then, you know, the final piece of the land grant mission, of course, is extension. And a lot of that is with me doing a lot of work with cooperative leaders in various programs, going to board meetings, hosting meetings, leading discussions on how can we help co-ops navigate today's turbulent environment.
And you have one of those extension events coming up with the Kansas Cooperative Council, who's celebrating their 80th anniversary. And Brian, what is this upcoming event?
So what we have coming up on August 12th and 13th is the Leadership Symposium for Cooperatives. So when the Capper Center was formed 40 years ago, this was one of the ideas that those co-op leaders had, is that we need to put on educational program that talk about timely events, things that are going on, and for co-op leaders to come and work together. And anyone who's really interested in co-ops. So today we call that the Leadership Symposium for Cooperatives. I work collaboratively with the Kansas Cooperative Council's president and CEO, Brandy Miller, on this program. And this year we've got a great program put together to really help co-op leaders come together and kind of talk through some of the challenges they're facing.
And who are some of those speakers and topics that will be at the symposium?
Well, one of the things that, you know, we really focus a lot on in this particular symposium is on the leadership side. You know, talent management is something we hear a lot about from co-op leaders, about how can we become, you know, better employees, improve, you know, our staff and us as leaders within our own organization. So we have three speakers that are going to touch on that. First, Dr. Dan Mosier is going to provide an update on what's going on with the students here in the College of Ag at K-State. We also have Donnie Campbell, to come in and speak and to talk about, what's your MVP. And what's unique about his leadership talk is that he's the individual who inspired the Ted Lasso show. So he's kind of that coach who inspired that. And then also we have Judge Tommy Webb, who's a retired district magistrate of the 26th Judicial District Court of Kansas, to come in and talk about how we as leaders can make a difference. He has a pretty powerful message there. But also, too, we want to provide some organizational updates. So Brandy and I will provide those updates as well. And then we also, it is 2024 is an election year. And then also in the co-op world in 2025, Section 199A is a tax credit for co-ops as well as for others in ag that is set to sunset. And so we're going to have Kansas political leaders come in and talk about the 2024 and 2025, what are some of the things that they're, thinking about? And then finally, weather is very important, as we talked about in our, ag, kind of update of, co-ops. So we have Gary Lezak is going to come in and provide a weather outlook. Gary, longtime meteorologist, weatherman in the Kansas City area on TV, but now he's moved into a different phase of his life and career where he's developed a forecast model with his new company called Weather 2020. And he does have agricultural case studies to provide. So a way to maybe have some early indications of weather events are coming up, certainly. I think that is top of mind for everybody in ag. So that'll round out our leadership symposium. I think it's a great lineup, and hopefully folks will get registered for it.
Who do you recommend take the time to attend this event, Brian?
I think anybody who has an interest in cooperatives. As you look across our state, we have 53 co-ops today, provide a lot of value to rural America, have a big impact on farming. About 50% of all our grain storage is tied to a co-op. Also, you have the farm credit system, credit unions, rural electric. So if anybody, has an interest in cooperatives and want to learn more, it's a great place to come and to hear from speakers, but also to network as well, to come together and share some of the challenges. So it's not designed for any one particular group, but if you're interested in co-ops, the registration is open for you.
And when does that registration close, and where can they find it?
So registration closes on Tuesday, July 30th. The best way to go register is just to go on our website, so accc.ksu.edu. You can click the link for under the meetings for Symposium and can get signed up that way, or just reach out to me. You can reach me at bbrigg@ksu.edu.
Brian, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was Director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center at K-State and Professor in Ag Econ, Brian Briggeman. I will link the resources that he mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has released a recommended decision to update all 11 federal milk marketing orders. K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk says the decision includes changes to pricing formulas as well as milk composition factors. He discusses some of the proposed rule changes and how producers can submit additional comments before the September 13th deadline.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning some of the proposed changes that are upcoming in our federal milk marketing orders. Many of you know for the last several years there's been great discussions about how we should change the milk marketing orders and how the calculation for your raw milk prices are computed. The last time we had a major overhaul to the milk marketing orders was actually in 2000. So in the last 23 and a half years, our milk market has changed, and the types of products that consumers are buying at the grocery store have significantly changed as well as we've seen some major changes in our export markets. Some of the proposed changes to the federal milk marketing orders are going to be associated with changes that we've seen in our production systems, as well as changes that we've seen in some of the ways that raw milk is actually utilized. So many of you probably participated in some of the comment period that was held last fall, as those orders were being considered. In the recent months, the USDA has worked through those comments and proposed some formal changes to the federal milk marketing orders. Those proposed changes have been now published in the Federal Register as of July the 15th, and there will be a 60-day comment period for dairy producers. So I encourage you to take some time and look at some of the changes that are being proposed and provide written comments as needed. Some of the things that are being looked at is how we utilize milk composition factors. As you will well recognize, in the last 23 and a half years, there's been significant changes in the content of fat and protein in the milk that we're shipping off our dairy farms. So further adjustments of those component factors are being proposed in this new set of regulations. Some other things that may impact you as well is what we call the Class 1 skim milk price mover. As you know, the way that is calculated was changed, and in the last 18 years, there's been some concern as to how that has been calculated. The proposed changes may have an impact on your base price, as if those changes had been in effect for the last 5 years, from 2019 to 23, it would have resulted in a 49-cent per hundredweight increase in your raw milk price. Some other things that are being proposed include Class 1 and Class 2 differentials and how those are calculated. One of the challenges we've faced the last several years in our marketing of dairy products is the increased cost of transportation. This disproportionately affects the cost of moving fluid milk and Class 1 prices to the marketplace. With those higher costs, we've seen some issues with how margins have been affected as well. So there are some changes to our Class 1 and Class 2 differentials reflecting the higher cost of transportation of trying to get these higher moisture content products to the consumers. As we look at the changes that are being proposed by the USDA, again, you will have 60 days to make comments on these. The comments need to be in by September 13th of 2024. After that period, USDA will take those comments into consideration as they work forward in providing input on final rules. We expect those final rules to maybe be available sometime around the first of the year. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy producers to be proactive as we look at the potential changes to the federal milk marketing orders.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.